Hey folks, it's your friend Doug, and I've got a treat for you. What I think is a treat. This is a story, a short story by Kristofferson. I think it was done when he was a young man, maybe even a teen. My friend Donna sent it to me, and this is to be read for the Kris Kristofferson Appreciation Group for Talent Tuesday. So this is The Rock, a short story by Kris Kristofferson. Well, I'll be gone to hell, my father said. He stood there with his hands on his hips and his Stetson pushed back far on his head. Then Harvey Jen said, I was checking the flood damage to see what we lost when I saw the damn thing. Must have been covered mostly with dirt and all before the water came up here. Well, imagine there was some mesquite around here to cover it up before the flood, and you wouldn't notice it unless you came up on the right side of it anyway, my father said. No, don't suppose you would at that, Harvey said. Boy, it's really something, though, isn't it? Well, I had to admit that it was really something, all right. I couldn't hardly believe my eyes when I saw it. What Harvey had found was a big rock. Oh, geez, it must have been 40 feet high, I guess. About the same size as the other big smooth rocks around there near the canyon wall. But this rock looked just like a big naked woman. No kidding. It's just what it looked like. She was lying on her back, sort of leaning up against the canyon wall in a kind of embarrassing way. And she had a sort of smile on her face. And I'm telling you, I've never seen anything like it. My father kept saying, God damn, like he couldn't believe it either. He and Harvey had decided that nobody could have done it. I mean, made a thing. And it must have always been there. It's just a freak of nature, I remember, he said. Well, I don't care what it was. But I was sure going to let people know about it when we got back to town. I mean to tell you, this was really some rock. I went up and rubbed my hand on it, and it was rock, all right. I think they say the rocks around there are some kind of granite. Come on, Kenny, get away from there, my father said. How come, I said. What's the matter with it? I don't know, he said, but I'm not sure it's such a good thing for a boy your age to be seeing. Well, that kind of stuck in my craw. And all the way home in the Jeep, I said hell and damn and talked as old as I could until I said, that sure is a hell of a damn-looking fence old man Palmer put up. They both stopped talking and looked at me, and I felt a little silly and didn't say anything else for the rest of the way home. When we pulled into the driveway, my father said, I'm going to call up Earl Bright from the Herald and take him out to see it. I jumped out of the Jeep and ran across the yard to the house. My mother was standing outside handing up clothes, and I said, we found a big rock that looks just like a naked lady. And I went into the house. My father and mother followed me in, and my father was saying, it's the damnedest thing you ever saw. A natural rock formation that looks just like some sort of dirty statue. He was down on the phone and said, it's damn near 30 feet high, really a big thing. And my mother was saying, what? What? What are you talking about? I said, it's at least 40 feet high, and it's a rock that looks just like a naked lady. Do you mean all over? She said, with a worried look. Yes, I said. And I was going to go on when my father motioned for us to be quiet. Oh, Earl, he said, this is Lynn Tipton. Howdy. Yeah, yes, I'm fine. We've run across a thing out here that you might be interested in looking at. I think it was uncovered by the flood. It's a big rock formation that's in the shape of a nude. Yeah, a woman. No, this is really big, and it looks real as any sculpture. He listened for a while and said, well, actually, what it looks like is a prostitute. He laughed, and my mother sent me out of the room. Well, Earl Bright came out, and he and my father drove back to the rock and took pictures and things, and the next day there was a big story about it on the front page of the Wheatonsville Herald. Of course, by this time, the whole school knew about it, and they all thought I'd found it, and I guess I was sort of a hero. A lot of us went out to see it after school, those of us who had bikes, because it's just what everybody seemed to be doing. When we got there, there were people all over the place. Why, I bet half of Wheatonsville was there, and the other half was on their way. They were all in a sort of half circle in front of it, staring and pointing and talk a mile a minute. A lot of the boys started making nasty remarks about it and laughing, and the women carried on something terrible. A lot of them acted mad or embarrassed, and a few of them just left, but most of them stayed. Well, the crowds kept coming to see it for a few days, and the women never stopped talking about it. The way I understand it, some of them were downright mad and said it was a disgrace and all. So they decided to call a town meeting and talk it over, and my father was supposed to go, seeing as how it was on our property, and I finally talked him into letting me go too. My mother said she didn't know if it was a good thing for children, and my father said, what the hell, he won't hurt anything, and so I went. Well, I'd never been to anything like that before, except maybe Sunday school. Everyone sat in rows facing up to the front of the church, which was where it was, and my father and I sat in the front row. The place was full of smoke and hot, and everyone was red and sweating. They started right off when one man got up and said that something had to be done, and he wasn't letting his children see that filthy goddamn thing, and what were we going to do about it? And everybody started saying, yeah, and that's right. And about then, I decided I had to go to the bathroom, but I couldn't leave since I was in the front row, and my father motioned me to be quiet every time I go to say something about it. Well, another man got up and said it was a slap on the face of every decent woman in Wheatonsville, and he looked red in the face and hepped up like he wanted to fight somebody. I thought that over a while about the slap in the face, but I never did get what he meant. Well, they went on like that for a while, and each one getting up and saying just about what the other had said and looking pretty pleased with himself when he finished. Then they all started saying, what are we going to do? And somebody said, we could ask her at least to cross her legs. And everybody laughed. I tried to tell my father I was going to go to the bathroom, but he couldn't hear me for the noise. Then the man that had said that about the slap in the face got up, redder than ever, and yelled that maybe this was funny to a lot of people, but he had a wife and 3 daughters and didn't think it was very funny. Well, this quieted the room down just like that. Just as I was bellowing to my father again that I was going to go to the bathroom. It was like bellowing at a funeral, and I was so ashamed I felt like never going to the bathroom again. But I went on anyway, and when I came back, they were still going at it. Mr. Ludlow, the Baptist minister, got up and said it was something or other as sin, and that any fool could see that, and that it was up to my father to do something about it since it was on our property. Well, my father hadn't said anything as yet, but I could tell he could have said plenty. He got up slow and said, look, this whole thing's getting out of hand. It's nothing to get excited about. He said it was just a natural rock, and it didn't seem to him there was anything anybody could or should do about it. If you didn't like it, he said, you shouldn't pay any attention to it. I didn't ask anybody but Earl Bright to come and see it, and no one has to see it that doesn't want to, he said. The man got up and said, how can we ignore it when that image of a leering strumpet is always over our shoulder? What kind of thing is that to show our kids? I didn't know what a strumpet was, but I agreed with him. It was a pretty hard thing to ignore. Well, my father stood there working his jaws like he does when he's about to blow up about something, but he didn't. And he said, well, let me know when you decide what to do. We stomped out of the church. After that, there were a lot of articles in the Herald about it, which my father read out loud to my mother, and looked like they were hearing about it all over the state. More people than ever came to see it since the meeting, and the kids were always sneaking over to take a look. My father read us where a board of censors was studying it, and that they weren't allowing any more pictures to be taken. One minister said it was made by God, and couldn't be bad, and we should leave it like it was, and some others followed him up, ones my father called crackpots, and tried to start a new religion about it. He said the nudists were claiming that it was proof that God was on their side, and that Billy Graham said it was proof that we were all going to hell. Then one day, a bunch of men and women came storming up in pickup trucks. The men had guns. Man got out of the first pickup, and I saw it was that man that had said that about the rock being a slap in the face. And he came up to my father and said, Leonard Tipton? Which sounded funny, because no one ever calls my father Leonard. Leonard Tipton, since you refuse to do anything about this, we're taking matters into our own hands. And he wheeled around and went blustering back to his pickup before my father could say anything. They all pulled out and went down the road to the rock, and pretty soon all the people started pouring out of there. And one of them told my father that the man with the guns had made them leave and set up a guard around him. My father went into the garage and got the Jeep, and I jumped in, and we drove to the rock. The men were standing pretty far from it with their guns, and my father pulled up the Jeep. Oh, for Christ's sake, he said. I looked at the rock and saw that they had taken a great big canvas tarp and covered up all the head of the woman. It really looked silly, I'll tell you, with that grinning head sticking over the top of the tarp. I'm not sure it didn't look worse than before. And they had the tarp staked down at the side so it wouldn't come off. I thought it looked funny enough, but the men guarding it were very serious, so I didn't laugh or anything. My father didn't say anything. He just put the Jeep in reverse and we wheeled out of there. Well, the thing was up before the state council for about a week, and we weren't too popular around then. My father said the people were acting like idiots, and he quit talking to them, and they quit talking to him. My mother said that maybe even if he was right, he ought to be sympathetic with the neighbors' feelings and tell them he'd do whatever they wanted him to do about it. He said, "Oh, for Christ's sakes, Alice, they completely lost their senses. They're making this thing into some goddamn monster or something." Then he laughed and pointed to the newspapers. "Or if they're not doing that, they're practically worshiping it." He said, "It's only a rock." And she said, "Oh, Lindy, you always have to be so difficult." And I said, "What's so only about a rock?" And they sent me to bed. Well, we didn't have to worry about it for long because some men from the state came up in trucks, and one of them showed my father some papers, and they drove back to the rock. They set up a bunch of dynamite and commenced to blast that rock until it didn't look like much of anything. And believe me, that was a show. So I guess that's about all there is to it. There's nothing there anymore. And everyone feels a little better. But when you think about it, and I don't guess I've thought much about anything else since they started making the fuss over it, that was some rock, all right. So there you go. That's The Rock by Kris Kristofferson. Read, hopefully, at least okay by me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I know we all love Kris. Thank you for listening.